everybody's going to have to do their best to stay together with the group. So we are going to have to spread out a little bit in there, but don't go wandering away from everybody. You got to keep your hard hats on while we're underground today, and you've got to make sure to watch out for all the tripping hazards in here. There's a lot more inside of a mine than there are out on the surface. There's going to be mine cart rails everywhere, maybe some air valves on the ground, so just watch where you guys are walking. And if you've got a question to keep things orderly, please try to raise your hand, wave it around to get my attention. Don't try to yell out to me or anything, because there's a lot of us in here. If you get in competition, it'll get very loud in there. So, you guys excited? Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll change that right now if you're ready. So watch your step with all the tripping hazards here. You guys come on inside.
We'll put one on one side. Oh, sure.
Underground online.
Hard to get organized here at the beginning.
There's a lot to do.
So now that you're all underground, I'll let your eyes adjust here for a second. But if you look up in the spotlight over here, you can get your first look at the gold vein we're going to be following today here underground. You guys see this kind of a white and yellow line on the wall here with that shiny gray dust coming out of it? And I'll light it up over here for you guys too. Not quite as shiny there because it's covered in sulfur. But this vein we're going to be following today was first discovered way back in 1871. This mine wasn't dug until 1927. So this is the third attempt at getting this vein out of the ground. We're connected to older mines that worked on this vein deeper into the mountain. We're connected to those down the winds, the big scary hole in the ground you may have noticed over here. And if you look at the vein up there on the wall, notice it dips down into the ground at about a 50-degree angle. This winds follows that vein down that entire 500 feet. So the miners just traced that vein down there. So there's a bigger level of this mine than you guys will see today. 100 feet below us, 200 feet below us, and 300 feet below us here on the winds. Just keep in mind the openings you see coming from below us today come from that level 100 feet down, through the vein, back up here to where the miners had already worked. And if you hang on to your hard hats and kind of bend over, where you'll see kind of the dark space at the bottom of the ladder down here, that's the level 100 feet below us. So just imagine that goes down 5 times as far as what you guys can see here. And make sure you guys come up and get a good look at it before people get in your way here. Come over on the other side. So aside from provides us natural ventilation. Alright guys, we're going to this way.
You'll see some color.
Yeah.
That's yellow and white.
Alright guys, so to actually create a mine like you're walking through the day, it's not as simple as Minecraft would suggest. You're not just in here with a pickaxe, breaking apart little pieces of rock. What you have to do is drill holes. You fill these holes full of explosives, then you blast this rock apart. If you drill a round of holes like this 6 feet deep, you only advance your mine 6 feet when you actually blast. When they were drilling this mine in the 1920s, they would have been using a column-mounted drill like you can see back there in the intersection, mounted on that big steel column. Nowadays we use more portable tools called jack legs. You'll see one chained to the wall a little bit later, but in the 1920s it would take 20 to 25 minutes to drill each one of these holes 6 feet deep, so it's a lot of work. Yeah.
What kind of rock is this that they're drilling into?
This is a schist.
Okay.
So it's a metamorphosed rock of some sort, but you'll see beautiful mica all through here. That's kind of all the little sparkles you guys see on the wall. Kind of easier in some places on the ceiling, but just keep in mind all this schist and gneiss is shiny. The vein is only this stuff up here that has the iron pyrite in it. So you guys see all this with the kind of salt coming out of it, this big layer up here. This is the vein. Now notice this is at least, what, 3 times as wide as where we started the tour here? That's a pretty significant change. What we're getting into here is a pocket of this ore, and that's where two curved edges of this crack have been pushed past one another, and they hold an area open wider to capture more of this ore. So geologists call that a dilation. Miners call it the ore body, the pocket, the mother lode. So imagine parts of this are going to be 20 feet tall instead of that little crack we started the tour with. 60 feet tall because they ran into the surface. If you guys look kind of back and to the left from right where I'm standing now, you can actually see all the way up there. It's kind of a blue light where it comes in from outside. And stopes like this, where you actually make your money in the mine. So you blast that ore down, you take it to your haulage level, you take it out of the mountain. Good question. Down here in the spotlight, you guys can see a pillar of this ore that supports the weight of the mountain above us. This little pillar right here is about 4 tons worth of ore, so that's a pretty significant amount of material. And, well, we'll begin to see some voids below us here too. This first one here used to be about 4 feet tall and plunged down 100 feet below us. The next one was about 7, 8 feet tall and again plunged down 100 feet below us. And watch your head as you go past this ore chute here. This is the lowest part of the tour.
Whoa.
Bring a little bit. They're mostly joke rules, but I skipped them once and someone locked their knees for too long and they became not a joke. So the joke is this is going to be so shockingly beautiful that it might make you faint. But if you lock your knees right, you might faint anyway, so make sure you're standing on comfortable level ground, right? Deep breaths and prepare yourselves for the shock up here, all right? Now you can do your own drum roll if you need it, but you got to hold your jaws up off the floor. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Ready.
All right. All right.
Oh, wow.
That's kind of sparkly up there, huh?
Sparkle.
Is that the gold vein?
This is the gold vein. This is one really rich little section of it. And what you're looking at up here is high-grade ore that runs anywhere from 7 to 10 ounces of gold to the ton.
That's a lot of gold.
Is it dissolved or is it actual nugget type gold, flake gold?
Most gold is like kind of crystals or rods or a foil. In this type of ore, we mostly have crystals and rods, and once those erode out of the ground, they get smashed into those little flakes.
So if we were to actually find gold up here, we would find gold crystals.
Yep, and the gold crystals in this material are typically less than 1/1000th of an inch in diameter.
So micron.
Maybe like
Tiny. Whiskers.
4 or 5 thousandths in length, so as long as your hair is wide.
Yeah. Tiny.
Yep. So that's why we have to look for things we can actually see, like all that fool's gold, to know that it's in the rock. And you take everything that has this fool's gold you can see out of the mountain, you crush it up into a dust, and you chemically and mechanically process it. I'll teach you about that more at the end of the
Gotcha.
tour. But where you guys see up here, the kind of color transition into being orange and green, where I'm kind of fanning my light around here, this is the richest material that has copper in it. The copper is a better indicator of gold than the iron we've been seeing all day. An even better indicator than that copper is lead. So you see over here where it's nice and dark gunmetal gray. So that's lead sulfide or galena. You may have heard of towns named galena. They're named because that mineral is in the ground. And in Colorado it also usually contains silver and gold, not just lead and zinc. But that galena you're looking at contains about 10 ounces of gold to the ton and about 20 ounces of silver. Pretty darn rich stuff. And I don't know how 7 to 10 ounces to the ton sounds to you guys, but where we start this tour, there's only half an ounce to the ton. So 7 to 10 is like, wow! A big open pit gold mine on the surface would go through anywhere from about 1/3 of a gram to 3 grams to the ton. So is a lot richer.
This
Yeah.
is still the mica schist we're in?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
so
checking.
you'll see all kinds of sparkles. Like above me here, I can show you more of that sparkly mica. See all that on the ceiling up here above me? So this is the rock the mountain was made of. And then around 60 million years ago, a huge fracture formed that went miles below your feet and relieved a reservoir of superheated water, maybe a little gas as well. And as that bubbled up through the crack, this is the first place it condensed on the walls of the crack. So the ore here is essentially this really valuable hard water buildup. Yeah.
What about that there? Is that like where they're mined?
Yep. So they mined on this level back another third of a mile past where you guys can see today. And there's, I think, about 27 stope chutes like this. So if we're at number 5, 6, and 7, that means there's 20 more of those around the corner that you're not able to see.
And,
Well,
how many turns are there in these mountains?
it's actually just one big long turn. So we turn back there, and then we just keep slowly turning until this thing makes almost a full 90, which is cool. And if you want to think about it, this level's another third of a mile long past where we stop here today, and there's 3 levels like this below us. There's about 2 miles of workings on the Phoenix here.
And
So.
how do they even mine gold?
Well, we got to take all that stuff out of here and crush it up into a dust, and I'll teach you the process.
What did you say?
I thought that's just nothing
On my the game?
Here you just leave food around and you build up a large healthy population of rats. Have you ever heard this saying, like rats from a sinking ship? Yeah, well, if anything goes wrong in here, the rats will pour out of the mine and you just follow them like rats from a sinking ship. And rats sounds a little freaky, but the rats that we have up here are really more like a squirrel. They're a giant pack rat. So it looks like a big giant chinchilla. Has big round ears like Mickey Mouse, and a cute little pink nose, big tall area. Anyway, they're really cute and have a big long bushy tail.
Apparently they're really cute.
So if you see lesions on the floor in here, that's from the pack rat. The safety pack rat.
Safety rat?
Yeah, it's just, they watch animals know things. You know how sometimes you get mine? Where, in West Virginia?
Was it West Virginia?
Same thing in Ohio.
Southern Ohio.
Well, that's like the border, right? Yeah, right there. Could have been.
Oh.
That's a hard life.
Look at that.
And Jeff so much of it.
Like a mouse 100 times
Oh, yeah,
bigger.
he died in his 80s.
Oh, there you go.
It's like the size of a chihuahua.
This small chihuahua dog. Oh my gosh, I don't wanna see him run.
We'll get to that in just a second. This room is a test. You've passed.
We passed the test.
So have you guys all noticed the big blue elephant in the room in here?
Yep.
Oh, that's the next gold vein we're here to see. All of that beautiful blue color comes from the copper content in this vein, and you've seen that kind of a yellow salt on the other walls of the mine, right? That yellow crust is stained blue here by all the copper content, and anywhere we expose this to too much sunlight it would turn brown, so on the surface it doesn't look anything like what you see here. But this vein has about 3 times as much gold in it as the Phoenix, where you just started the tour. We're not in a pocket of this material yet, but they'd really like to be, and this is the vein you kind of invest in us exploring by coming to take the tour here today. So anyway, you can imagine, 60 feet below us, straight down, and follow the vein, it's about 80 feet on the vein. There is a level where they've explored this. They worked on this vein from about 1988 to about 1992, and really like to start again.
Wait, they still work here?
This is technically an active mine. We don't take a bunch of ore out of here and process it because we can't do the last step that I'll teach you about over here in a second, but we have permits from the federal government and the state, and this is technically an active mine. So, thing like a dog.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Goodbye.
I'll take a turn after these guys.
Doesn't say.
This is the exciting part.
Listen, we're gonna look at these right.
Alright guys, so this is that vein you just got your picture taken with through a microscope. Alright, so from one side of the image to the other is about 1/100 of an inch. So that little piece of gold you're looking at is less than 1/1000th of an inch across.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. There's a lot of other valuable stuff in here too. You got cobalite, this is very rich with copper, got a little bit of gold, that's what turns the vein over there blue. Then there's lead and zinc sulfide, the galena we saw back there in the Phoenix, that dark gray shiny stuff. This is the orange shiny stuff, the chalcopyrite, and the pyrite, the fool's gold we've been seeing all day long. Now everything here except that gold is mixed with sulfur, so it's a sulfide, all right? And all of these sulfides except the pyrite contain a little bit of gold, so we want to capture all of these. If we just grind this stuff up into a dust and try to gold pan through it, the sulfur and the sulfides will stick this stuff together kind of like really bad dough. Alright, so first we're going to concentrate out the sulfides, get them out of the way, and then we'll get to the pure metals based on their densities. So let's crush this rock up to separate those materials. We're going to take a chunk of rock like this, about 50 pounds, feed it through a big jaw crusher outside, crunch it down into pieces about the size of a plum or a peach pit, and then those would be fed through this jaw crusher to crunch down into 1-inch gravel. That gravel would be loaded into the ball mill back here. That ball mill would have 65 of these 16-pound manganese steel mill balls, and those tumble around together faster than a concrete mixer to crush that rock down into dust, finer than baking soda. It stays in that machine until it's washed out of the cone here on the end, and everything gets washed out into these flotation cells. If you guys try to take a peek into these flotation cells, while I light them up here, they're essentially just giant Frappuccino machines. We're going to mix everything together, we're going to blow bubbles in these tanks, and then we're going to skim the soap bubbles off of the top. So to our tank with our gold ore, we need to add a soap, and we're going to add a special chemical known as a collector that's going to stick those acidic sulfides to the soap in order to float it to the surface of our tank here. And this special chemical that does that for us is known as a xanthate, which is a really expensive way of saying synthetic caffeine. Yeah, this was discovered by accident using strong black coffee, so we'll just call this caffeine. What happens here is essentially emulsification. One tail of your caffeine molecule wants to bond with the acid in your sulfides. That sulfur happens to be pretty acidic. The other tail wants to bind with a lipid, a fat. Acid and fat, like in cooking, emulsification, huh? And so the fat comes from our soap. We use soap made from the fat of pine trees, pine oil, which you all know as pine sol. So when we froth that into a soap bubble, the oxygen in the soap bubble carries the heavy metal against the force of gravity to the top of the tank, where we skim the soap bubbles off to capture the heavy metal. Pretty neat, huh? It's a little weird, kind of summarized, but that is how they do it. It's a xanthate, collector chemical, which is a sodium molecule ought to behave like caffeine, and pine oil. They add other chemical compounds to float out the pyrite, chalcopyrite, cobalite individually, but it all gets floated out. Then we roast those metals we concentrate after we dry the soap out of them. Yeah.
How do you make these machines?
Factories, and then they truck them in here.
Yeah, but how do they make them in factories?
Well,
You don't know, Isaac.
I could tell you, but it'd be a whole other tour. These are all cast steel, and like this is, it's really advanced material science to make really tough stuff. Like this steel ball right here tumbles around, and in 6 weeks of work would be worn down to only the size of a grape, like a grape to eat.
And how heavy is it?
It starts off as being 16 pounds. And there's huge plates inside of this machine that wear down, and all this just has to be constantly serviced and replaced. So they barely make it. And the big expense is having all this advanced. The roasting, that's where we heat these metals containing sulfur up under a layer of flux. That's what this black rock used to be. That flux protects those metals from the oxygen in the atmosphere as we heat them up to about 2,600 degrees, and the sulfur bubbles up through that flux, escapes into the atmosphere, or nowadays we capture that as a sulfuric acid product. But anyway, after the sulfur is gone, you draw the pure metals out from underneath, and you discard this flux as a waste. But we need a machine to do that in that captures all the sulfur that comes out of it. We need a big autoclave to roast our ore in. There are huge companies that do this on a massive scale, but there's no one small enough for us to work with, so you invest in us buying the equipment to do that ourselves.
They ever find a like they're cracking in the rock and they open it up and there's just this gold layer of crystals in a quartz bug or something. Did they ever find that in here?
Not in this mine that I know of, but in mines up here, like the one across the valley, there's a small area that's like 1,600 ounces to the ton because of that.
Are you okay?
1,600 ounces to.
Alright. So after we've concentrated all those sulfides, we can get to the pure metals using a shaker table. I've got a picture of that to show you here on my phone. This table oscillates back and forth. Lightweight materials are washed off of one side of the table, while gold and other heavy metals sit on the surface of the table and get bumped along towards the opposite edge. The denser something is, the more inertia it carries, so the farther it moves every time the table bumps. That's why the gold you see is up there on its own. And all that yellow you see is gold, ground up finer than baking soda. So there's a lot of it there to be able to see it.
Guys, look. Louise, look. That's part of the vein. See the blue? That's the copper. You see the blue? You see the blue? And you see that? This? Oh, it's there.
There's no laxation because this is hard rock.
That's a shaker tape.
But if you're concerned, you always put it in first.
Alright guys, so this is a shaker table like in the image I showed you. The gold would end up over here on this side of the table by us. The waste would wash off this side of the table over here, and those are separated by the table bumping back and forth, putting inertia into the material that's heavy enough to stay on the table as the water washes away all that quartz, your lightweight gangue material. If you guys ever heard the buzzword single stream recycling, that's where they shred your recyclables and set them across a table just like this. Blood from slaughterhouses is kept out of the environment thanks to tables like this. Frozen peas and corn are sorted good from bad. They have all kinds of uses, but all this started for zinc and not even gold. So, pretty incredible how much work that'll take, huh? And hopefully now you understand why gold is so expensive. The gold panning will be easier. There's not as much gold out there as there is in here, but it's not as much hard work. So, the last thing to see before we leave is to see the way this vein runs all the way through here up above us. And that's that same one you guys get your picture taken with back there. This is the best I can show you, just this crack in the mountain we're following. Everywhere you see it's where the mine will cut through that crack.
So all they did then essentially is pull out like a 2 or 3 inch wide piece here. So they took out all this rock just to get this little bit of vein out.
Yep, and this is bigger than just to get the vein because there's also our underground mill in here.
Yeah.
But, yep,
So when
exactly. Alright, so I think everybody's about caught up with us now. So at the very end of your gold panning process, what you guys will work down to is a little bit of this black sand. This black sand is a mixture of materials from iron to lead to silver, manganese oxide, but this is the layer of material that's going to hide your gold. So as I shake this up, the gold sinks down underneath that material. I can flip this over, and now we're at the very end. I can just swirl this around. You see what shows up underneath that black sand? Actual gold. So it takes a lot of work to find this stuff. And you see it can be hidden really easily under that black sand, so don't give up when you get to the end of this process without looking for that gold. And to look for it, you just gotta swirl that black sand downhill away from that gold. 3 weeks of doing these lessons up here to find, so don't expect to get this lucky right away. And you have to look certain places out in the creek to be able to find this stuff. Now the biggest hint I'll give you today is that you want to avoid something called mica. Remember the mica I talked about there inside the mine, the other shiny stuff? Well, watch what happens when I stir up this water. You guys see all the shiny glitter in the water there? That's all mica. That is the lightest mineral out here in the creek, and you want to avoid that when you're looking for good gold-bearing material. You want to find big gravel, like this stuff here I previously went through, that's built up behind some kind of obstruction in the river, whether it be a curve, a place it widens suddenly, a log, a rock. There's all kinds of different features that can hold good gravel like this. Use some material, so I think I'm going to take the stuff from right behind this rock here. You guys see in my shadow where all these bubbles are recirculating behind this rock? I'm going to dig in right here and I'm going to take this little bar of gravel you might be able to make out. Alright, get as much as you can carry. See, that's nice big gravel there. No mud. Now I've got a good amount of material. We need a calm place out in the creek to work. So I've got this little pond here I make up for the lessons. You want to get out of the current so that the current doesn't carry away the fine material in the bottom of your pan. But get a spot to work, get some water, and start shaking it up. As we shake it up, the first thing that's going to happen is any big rocks are going to rise up to the surface. Let's say that I picked up a couple of big rocks like these ones. As I wash this around, watch how they stay up there on the surface. And look, another one has risen up from the depths. Because we don't have a screen to take care of these big rocks, we shake around flat, wash them off, and then pick them out of here. You got to take out any rocks that are bigger than your whole thumb. So none of those look too bad. After you've got the big rocks out of there, keep shaking angle as you can so that all that heavy stuff is going to go down to one side of the pan. And you got to shake like this for 30 seconds at minimum. So it's pretty tedious, but you got to do it. If you want to cheat, you can just stay down in the water. So you see how all that gravel's risen up to the top, kind of in the center of the pan together? That's your goal. That's all right, thanks, I'm already past it. Appreciate it though. Now that we've got it all shaken up, we're going to wash away the layer of material on the top of the pan. Just go down in the water and go back and forth. See how that big gravel got carried right off of there? Now we're going to shake it back up. We're going to do that again. 1, 2, 3. Even more of that big gravel gone. We're going to shake it back up 2 or 3 more seconds. 1, 2, 3. See, the setup's pretty tedious, and then this part's fairly easy. You just got to 1, 2, 3. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. And look, we're getting down into that black sand. The more black sand you see in a spot, the better the spot you've chosen. Now you guys cross your fingers, I found some to show you this time. And I'll bring this up there, we'll have a look. So I'm going to come closer to you over here. Some black sand built up. Shake it around. And then flip it over. And swirl that black sand away downhill.
Doesn't look like you found any.
Well, you guys must not have rubbed the lucky bucket enough. Hold on, let's try that again. Swirl that black sand away downhill. I think there's one teeny tiny little piece there.